Hi, Amber. Welcome to the Autism Little Learners podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Well, I think I'm more excited, and thanks so much for having me.
Yes. Can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
I would love to. So, my name is Amber Arrington. I am a mother to six children, ranging from 3 to 20, and three of my kiddos are autistic.
Six kids. That's a lot, Amber.
I mean, I know it probably does sound like a lot. I feel like I had two families though, because like my older kids are between 16 and 20, and then my little ones are 3 and 5. So it was like I had
Oh,
four and then I had two. It feels better than six. It's just
yeah.
so it's strange raising like teenagers and young adults and toddlers and preschoolers.
There's something kind of neat about that because I think of my kids now who are grown adults, and it feels like a lifetime ago since they were little. So
Yeah,
being
I
able to
bet.
parent kind of again when I don't know, you know more. You're hopefully as we get older, we're wiser. That's kind of a gift in itself.
It really is a gift. Like the little ones are just pure magic and joy, and I love it. I'm so grateful. It's some days I'm like,
Oh,
why did we do this again? But no, generally it's pretty joyful.
that's awesome. Well, today I would love to chat with you about your journey as a mother to three autistic children. Can you start by telling us about your son and your two daughters?
I would love to. So, my three autistic kiddos, and I need to tell this piece because I just think it's interesting. So, we do have six kids, but we really struggled to build our family. It took us 20 years. So, my first four kids were adopted as babies. There were two different birth moms, okay? And then our bottom two babies are IVF finally worked 20 years into my marriage. Okay. That being said, so Tyson is 20. He did not receive his official medical diagnosis for autism till he was 12. That was a very long journey. There is a lot to that story, as you would imagine. And then the little ones, my little miracle baby girls, were diagnosed Mallory at 27 months and Kennedy at 19 months. And I felt differently when each one of them received their diagnosis because the circumstances were different for each one. But that's kind of how that went.
Wow. So 27 months and 19 months, and then 12 years old. That
Hmm.
just kind of goes to show where I don't know. Throughout the years that I have been a speech language pathologist, you see kids come in and being diagnosed at very different ages. And
Yeah.
I know for sometimes for girls, it can take longer to get the diagnosis. Do you feel like because of your son, you are more cued into some of those kind of
Hmm.
indicators of autism?
Honestly, no, because when my son was diagnosed with autism, like I still didn't even know anything about autism. Y- it was so different then. It was hard to identify then. He was diagnosed with ADHD first. I guess back then they wouldn't even diagnose you with both. They didn't know that they could be comorbid conditions, ADHD and autism. So that no, when the little ones were diagnosed, I was blindsided. It'd been 11 years since I had a baby, and I forgot I expected them to meet their milestones, and I wasn't paying attention to what was being missed, and what they relate to. So he taught me how to advocate once I knew what I was dealing with, but I he didn't. Unfortunately, I was not wise to what was going on when the little ones were going through that.
Yeah, that's a great way of explaining it because of the ADHD, autism
Hmm.
being later. It's just a really different path for him versus your daughters. So, with your
Yeah.
daughters, what characteristics did you notice first since they were so young?
So the tricky thing was Mallory turned one January of 2020, and you're going to know where I'm going with this. She turns one. I become pregnant again with my next baby, and then in March we have COVID hit, and we have shut down everywhere. So like between one and two, we're just pretty much locked in our house, not going anywhere, not going to parks, not going to grocery stores, and I am just missing it. Like she seemed to be progressing, but then when, looking back, I realized no, she started to regress. She wasn't pointing, she wasn't clapping, she wasn't waving, she wasn't saying mom and dad. She wasn't starting to build sentences once she hit closer, 18 months to 2. Um, she was hand leading, she was scripting, and I just thought she was brilliant because by age 2, she could count to 10. She knew her letters, numbers, shapes, and colors. I was like, this kid's brilliant. She could say a word, she could label things, but I just was missing it. And those were some of the signs with her. With the littlest one, the signs were that was different because she hit all her milestones.
Mm.
And it's kind of a long story how I accidentally ended up with her being diagnosed when I was trying to get her in as a typically developing peer model at Mallory ABA based preschool. Um, there were some subtle things that started to happen, like toe walking. And then her eye contact was starting to diminish a bit and not having that like interaction as she played. Those were the only things I could really highlight as to what was going on with her when she was diagnosed at 19 months.
Wow. So at 19 months, who suggested she be tested?
It was just because Mallory was already going to this preschool where they had half typically developing peer models and half autistic kiddos in. And I just wanted to put Kennedy in as a peer role model, and wanted them to be together. But as such, they do an assessment. And so I just brought her to be assessed. I didn't even understand that I was walking into an ADOS, autism evaluation, as the assessment.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's what happened. And so through the ADOS, like she wanted to leave halfway through it. She wasn't as engaging with the practitioner that was giving the ADOS assessment, and those type of things. So at the end of the assessment, they're like, she scored at moderate risk for autism, and we think you should have her evaluated. And I was like, are you kidding me? What?
yeah.
I was so not, I thought I knew it all. And I, very subtle signs with her. Even the pediatrician 3 weeks before was like, nope, I'm not worried about her. She's talking better than my 2-year-olds at 18 months, you know? It was a weird situation.
Yeah,
But I just decided to lean into it because I thought that the supports we could put in place would only help.
absolutely. And it was interesting when you said you listed off a lot of things like gestures for
Hmm.
Mallory. You weren't seeing gestures like pointing,
Hmm.
tapping, that kind of thing. And I think sometimes people, parents, even SLPs, we kind of forget about some of those areas that a lot of kids develop naturally that are maybe missing in some of our autistic little ones or kids that maybe are at risk for autism. And so I'm glad you mentioned that because it's not always just delayed language or some of the other characteristics you mentioned, those gestures. That's
Right.
one that we look at in the ADOS and when we're looking at
Exactly.
history.
Just that simple pointing. I didn't realize what a big signal that was to
Yeah.
what's going on with communication is the pointing or lack thereof.
Yeah. And then leading with a hand, that one,
Hmm.
it can happen with other disability areas, but it's much more common, I would say, in autistic kids. They
Yeah.
bring you to what they want, which is a great way to communicate, but that kind instead of pointing, they're bringing you. And that subtle little thing is something
Yeah,
that can kind of make you go, I wonder if they might be autistic. That's one little piece.
for sure. Yeah.
So, is there anything that you've struggled with? I think all of us as parents struggle in many areas, but was there anything you struggled with as a mom of 3 autistic children?
Well, sure. There's a lots of things, just like you know. And thinking about how I might answer this, my answer is what I struggled with and what I struggle with
Mhm.
is would probably boil down to, am I doing the right thing and am I doing enough? Especially when it comes to raising the autistic kiddos, because there is when you're handed an autism diagnosis, at least for me, and I know for a lot, I left the psychologist's office with a packet of ABA providers, and that was literally it. No
Mhm.
other information, no understanding of autism high level, no understanding of like debates inside of autism. And, so I could make an educated decision on what I would and wouldn't do with my kiddos. So you know, wondering if I'm doing the right thing and if I'm doing enough. I would say that sums it up.
Yeah. I, when you say that, it makes me think of over the years, doctors have so much power. Doctors or, psychologists, when kids come out or adults come out of testing for anything, those recommendations, if you're a parent and you don't know anything about autism or not as much, like you had experienced the label of autism with your son, but then with
Yeah.
your daughters, totally different age, totally different scenario, different set of characteristics and indicators. So you walk out of there, and of course, those two things you said, you want to do what's best for them, but I'm sure, question yourself all the time. Is this what's best? Is this the best path that's going to kind of authentically support them, yet help them in the areas they need to live as much of an independent, happy life as possible?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
walking away with one thing like ABA therapy as the plan and not knowing, like you said, all of the kind of the controversy, the hearing from autistic voices, all of
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
How could someone just tell you that and put it in a parent recommendations? It's like you have to decide
Exactly. Exactly. Which is why I wrote a book, and we could talk about that later.
that. I cannot wait to hear about that. I feel like also your story reminded me of when I was in Russia in 2015 and 2016. Me and the special education teacher that I co-taught with for a decade, we went there to work with their teachers to teach them how to work with young autistic kids because over there they're really behind on strategies, but the parents are so thirsty for any information. And we met with one family and they said their doctor there said it's autism, and they gave them like a prescription sheet that said use PECs. And that's all they got, and they didn't even know what PECs stood for or what it meant.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Wow.
So we were just like, "Oh my goodness," like, we were the first ones to explain even what that was and what AAC was, like, no support at all. So
Yeah.
you think of even here in the United States, that's where it was at some point. And I talked in my podcast episode on the 2nd of April about just not that long ago, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, even some of the 80s, parents, mothers were blamed for their
Yeah.
children being autistic. They were called
Yeah.
refrigerated mothers and cold and uncaring. And so that is not that long ago. So we're still evolving
Mm-mm.
when it comes to autism, and strategies and all of that. So it can be
Absolutely. Super confusing.
so what advice would you have for special educators, SLPs like myself, or other therapists when it comes to talking to parents about autism?
So, from what I have gleaned from following other service providers like on social media and such, speech therapists, OTs, and just kind of being in this space, is it can be a very touchy subject to talk to a parent about autism, particularly if you're in the position where you suspect it as their therapist and the parent is not wise to the idea. Um, and that is tricky. But I was thinking the reason it is tricky is because the narrative has been what it has been about autism. And I feel like that's the root of the problem to where, so if therapists, if professionals are allowing themselves to be educated, which if they're listening to your podcast, they probably are, about things outside of what they learned in school and just like what they're in the motion of doing all the time and think as long as they are willing and open to learn new things, if they're out there learning about neurodiversity affirming care, if they're learning about autism as a whole, they're informing themselves about the PDA profile of autism, for example, and
Mhm.
and realizing that autism isn't a scary, like sad thing. Like if me as a parent and you suspect my child is autistic and you came at me like, hey, I think you might want to have your child assessed for autism, and you said it in that tone, I would be like, oh, and you're like, yeah, just, let's get the assessment. If that's the case, it's okay. There's so much we can do. No big deal. Maybe not say no big deal, but like
Yeah.
there is hope to this. Like it's not sad. It's not a death sentence. It's not an emergency. There's so much we can do. Autistic people can live happy lives. Your life is not over if your child is autistic. And maybe if we're coming at it from that perspective, then it wouldn't be so scary to parents, and then they wouldn't be so afraid to talk to parents about it. I don't know. What do you think about that, Tara?
Amber, I think that's such a great point because so many people, and I've probably been there, many years ago, really hard and scary to bring it up because you know that parents are going to react one of two ways. Like they're going to be kind of open to it, like, okay, or it's going to be really hard for them. And no one wants to bring something hard up to parents. But
Yeah.
back then, autism was considered a tragedy, right? We hear
Yeah.
people talking about that. Autism is not a tragedy. And
Hmm.
so, exactly like you said, if we're following people and learning more, it'll be easier to bring it up as just one of those things like you would bring up if a child had a speech delay. It's just
Yeah.
information.
Or they need to get their hearing checked. You like it's
Yeah.
just a thing to find out.
Yeah. And it's not a tragedy. And it's how it's presented too. When people get nervous about bringing it up, then it makes it sound like it's something really bad because you're struggling to like, oh, talking around it. And
Yeah.
I've seen it in IEP meetings. There was one IEP meeting I was in where just bringing it up, the team member like started crying. The parent wasn't crying, but
Hmm.
she was crying and like tearing up and wiping away tears and saying, "Your child's still the same child they were before I said this." And like it just made it very dramatic. And I think when you're just more matter of fact about some of the characteristics or indicators you're seeing, and it can kind of
Yeah, I think
take them in a direction.
that energy, that positivity, and the which you would in the way that you would deliver a message like that, I think would mean the world to a parent. Just
Yeah.
don't make it sad. Make it just a fact and be upbeat about it because there is a lot to hope for. And there's a
Yeah,
lot we can do.
absolutely. Absolutely. And your child, yeah, of course they're the same child.
Mm.
And I think sometimes parents still need to go through a process of grief, maybe just like anyone would if they were, I don't know, talking about any disability or any way that their child maybe is different. But moving on from that, as a parent, that's kind of something you have to do on your own. And
Yeah.
for us as educators, SLPs, we want to stay positive and keep showing all of the strengths of the child. We've talked a lot recently about deficits based versus strength based IEPs. As much as we can show them the strengths that sometimes are there because of the child's autism, that can be
Yeah.
really, really helpful to parents.
I think that's so important.
So, how can educators help parents feel comfortable leaving their young autistic children in our care? Because I know sometimes it is so hard, especially when your child is non-speaking or maybe not reliably speaking, to kind of let you know how their day went, how they're feeling. Like, how can
Yeah.
we make you feel more comfortable or help you to?
Um, okay, so I've been going through this actually as I've been shopping for the kindergarten for Mallory, which is coming up in a couple months. And I recently went to, well, I've toured the school, but then they said, we want you to bring her to spend a day here so we can just like see how it goes. So I took her to the school. It was a private school. Well, I planned to take her. Before I did, I emailed and I was like, so my daughter is autistic and her kind of the biggest signs of her autism is her anxiety levels. And so I just want to make sure it's going to be okay if I stay with her, if she needs, otherwise I'm not sure how long will last. And just over and over again, like the front desk lady was like, "Oh, well, you can stay with her for 15 minutes until school starts and then, and then we'll need you to leave." And I escalated it up to like the owner of the school and same response, essentially like, um, I just felt there was no compassion for the fact that I'm bringing my 5-year-old child to a brand new place. They don't, she doesn't know any of the teachers, any of the students, and you think I'm just going to drop her off there? And like, I get you have to do that at some point, sometimes when it's actually kindergarten, but
Right.
not for an introduction. I just felt that they were so insensitive to the feelings of me as a mom with my baby who now she can speak. And so for non-speaking kiddos, like even more, I would say, like to have compassion for the feelings of dropping off your baby who maybe doesn't communicate that great in a brand new environment, um, for how the parent might feel about that. And I just expected them to be like, of course, you can stay as long as you need. We want to make sure she's comfortable, that type of thing. And I guess maybe
Yeah.
some schools have rules around not letting parents in. But in my brain, I thought, like, don't moms come in and volunteer all the time in classrooms? What would be the difference?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. That was a hard experience for me and a huge turnoff. And I will not be taking her to that school
Right. I get
because of
that.
it.
For me, that would be like red flag, red flag. If they're gonna not be flexible when you're expressing your
Yeah.
child's anxiety and all of that, it's not like you're asking to come to kindergarten every day, all day, but this is just drop her off with a bunch of strangers. That would be a big no for me and an indicator that you might have problems down the line with things where they aren't
Yeah.
comfortable.
Well, then this was the other piece to the story. I called a couple hours later to check in and see how she was doing. And the front desk lady was like, well, no news is good news.
Oh gosh.
I was like, you must have forgotten what it's like to have a young child that you really worry about, which my bad for assuming. She's like, well, no, I know how that feels because of my dog. Do you want me to go check? And I was like, yes, please. Would you go check?
Oh my
So
gosh.
I don't know.
Oh,
So I think this just leads into the next question you might ask, and it's just about like communication.
yeah.
So let's just have some open a communication plan, especially in the beginning, so we can make sure that
Yeah.
our child feels comfortable.
Yeah. And I think as an educator, I can always sense and tell when parents are really, really nervous when their child's starting. Now, when they were starting with me when I was in the classroom, it was the last decade I was at early childhood. So we had new 3-year-olds, 3-year-olds that had never been in a school or group setting before. And so for some parents, that's really, really hard. And for some of them, sending them on the bus to school,
Oh
also
my goodness.
other thing, really, really hard. So for me and the teacher that I co-taught with, we always made sure if they were feeling that way that we called after like a half hour, let them know how they were doing, kind of proactively, right?
Yeah.
And called at
Yes.
the end of the day to let them know how it went and just things like that during, like you said, that beginning time where till they know us, they trust us, and they get to the point where they're feeling comfortable.
That would mean the world. That would have meant the world to me for sure.
Mm, gosh, it's so funny, like you said, how like the office lady was not even responsive to understanding what it
Such
might be
a
like in your
disconnect
shoes.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, probably does that all day, like, drop your kid, go, and couldn't take your perspective on that very well.
Yeah, that was a tricky day.
Well, Amber, wanted to talk to you also today about 2 really, really exciting things that you have happening right now. You just published a book titled Not Atypical Motherhood: The Guide for Navigating a Child's New Autism Diagnosis. And I'm so excited to get my copy. I think it's going to be here today. Can you share with everyone what the book is about?
I can't believe you ordered one. I would have sent you one, you
Oh,
silly goose.
no. Supporting
Oh,
you.
that's so fun. Okay, so it is real. The book is about what it says. So this is the book that I wish I would have been handed when I left that psychologist's office with the diagnosis for my daughter. And it's just like a book from my heart to the parent's heart saying, okay, so you just got this diagnosis for your child. And I do kind of talk about the journeys that I've taken with each of my three autistic kids to diagnosis and to services and where they're at now. But the book is more about them and helping them. I kind of consider it a cross between Chicken Soup for the Soul, for those who remember that, and Autism 101 for Dummies. Like it's just that, so that a parent can get their emotions around the narrative of autism together, but also learn about possible services, special education, how to talk to family, how to process the emotions, where to access services like disability services. So like just high level, all the things they need to know to like get their feet back on the ground right after diagnosis.
Wow. So needed, Amber. This kind of thing is so needed. I can think of just all the little ones that I worked with where they maybe got the educational label first before going out and getting a medical label. And so even in the early childhood setting, educators could refer people to this book as
Yeah.
they're navigating the diagnosis, or we call it more of an educational label in the education setting. But parents are always like, where do I go next? What do I do? What should I do? And
Yeah.
hearing you also
And
say how to explain it to family.
yeah. I think that's important. And the thing is, I've talked to some of my kids' service providers, speech therapists, OTs, and said, so when you're working with a family that just got an autism diagnosis or they suspect it, where are you sending them for information? Like, what do you tell them to do? And resoundingly, the answer was, I don't know where to send them.
Yeah.
And so that I feel like this book could be helpful for sure, even in that setting. And my son was that kiddo who had the educational diagnosis or designation before he had his medical one. So
Yeah.
that definitely happens.
Yeah. I think sometimes when kids come in, maybe for a speech delay or whatever, um, and then they go through a little screening process. That's when some of the professionals that work with autistic kids kind of go, oh wait, okay, I'm seeing some other indicators. And then yeah, and one of the things even parents ask us at that early childhood level, or asked us, was, do I need to go get the medical diagnosis? Because we would explain the
Hmm.
difference between the two. Like, we're
Yeah,
not a
yeah,
medical professional diagnosing your child, but then they kind of ask, well, should I go do that? And because of all the long wait lists, and the kind of social services or things that can open up to them, maybe grants and things like that, we usually would say,
exactly.
yes, go do that, because you're going to be on a wait list and it's going to take a while. So
Exactly.
yeah, that would be
Exactly.
really great support for parents.
Yeah, I really hope so. It's being well received so far from my heart to theirs. So I'm excited about that.
Good. I can't wait to read it and shout it from the rooftops about your book.
Thank you. Well, that other piece where you said they get stuck waiting on wait lists, should we talk about that?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, because I think you were leading me there, so
I
I'm just
was,
like
I was.
jumping ahead.
Well, a couple
Um,
different things. You have, okay, so there's the other really exciting thing Amber has going on right now is she's hosting an online summit, and it's coming up really soon. So please tell us all about it and the title of it.
Fantastic. It's called, so my company is called Autism Savvy. This is what I spend my life, my new life's work at this point. This is what I do, is supporting parents navigating an autism diagnosis for their child. So the Autism Savvy Summit, the While You Wait edition, is what's happening at the end of April. And so it's just, the summit is geared towards supporting families who are stuck on a wait list to get that official autism diagnosis, or who have the new diagnosis but are stuck waiting for services, or even for those who just can't access services. So we're bringing the professionals and the experts to them so that they can learn how to support their own child, like at home and in the community during that wait. And Tara is one of our experts. I'm so excited.
Oh, I was excited to really think of it through that lens and record a training for parents that are at that point. Like, what can I do at home? For me, it was talking about visual supports and communication, but what can I do while I wait? It's
Yeah.
just it's so needed, Amber. So
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that.
Your presentation was perfect. Like it's going to help so many families, I think. Yeah, and I loved that you could take yourself to that lens and speak to that. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's different than what I normally do because usually when kids come to me or I'm supporting other educators and even parents, they usually have the diagnosis. So
Yeah,
thinking of it through this lens was just really fun to do because it kind of takes me back to where parents are before they come to me.
makes
So,
sense.
how can people register for your summit? What's all the info for that?
Well, I'm pretty sure you're going to have a special link that you'll put in the bio that they can register through. Yeah, and so that would be the best place to go. In general, they can learn more about what we do at autismsavvy.com.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, I'm going to link everything in the show notes. And then you also have something else brewing, which is your membership.
I do. I do offer this Infinity Mom Club community, and so I'm just supporting parents in there, moms in particular, because I am one. That's just my demographic. Again, with the new diagnosis, or it doesn't even have to be new. Any moms that are looking to be able to find resources and access experts and ask questions and really take action for their child, down to holding their hand to navigating insurance and their state disability insurance or state disability agency, anything that they need help with, they can have direct access to. And again, trying to serve those people that want to be able to ask questions directly to professionals like BCBAs, OTs, speech therapists, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, um, and can't really get to them otherwise. This community is great for all of that.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so what people can do are follow you, and
Yes.
can they find you, first of all?
At Autism Savvy. I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok.
All right, perfect. Instagram is where we connected for the first time,
Yes.
sort of, on social media.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and then the summit, they can register for that, and then throughout those processes, they'll learn more about your membership if that's something they're interested in too. Or you can just message Amber. She's super responsive and would love to answer any questions you have. And is there
Yes.
anything else that I missed today, Amber?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground
I
today.
think we did. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I cannot wait to be part of your summit, but also be registered for it and be able to take in all the goodness that you've put together there.
Thank you so much, Tara. I loved being here with you today.
All right. We'll talk to you soon, Amber. Bye.
Bye bye.